Professor Wiseguy here with another 5-minute fix. But I need to ask you, would you rather talk about subject and object pronouns or listen to me reminisce about my childhood? I know it's a hard question and you just might be wanting to face death by pronoun. Well, indulge me and I think it'll pay off. You see, when I was a young pup, after a fierce game of kickball, I occasionally said something to my mother like, "Me and Tony beat Scott and Rob." Mom, without exception, would respond by saying, "Mean Tony? I didn't know Tony was mean." You see, that was her way of correcting my grammar. I was left to figure out that I should have said, "Tony and I beat Scott and Rob." Why is it that way? Why do we say Tony and I rather than me and Tony? Well, let's take the order of the words first. Why is it Tony and I rather than I and Tony beat Scott and Rob? The answer? It just is. That's just the way we do it. I've heard it suggested that putting I last is a politeness thing. You know, you're putting the other person first. I don't know if that really explains it, but we always put that pronoun that refers to ourselves, and it could be I or me or we or us. We put that last. But what about this I and me thing? Why should I say Tony and I beat Scott and Rob instead of Tony and me beat Scott and Rob? Well, that's where we get into the whole notion of subject pronouns and object pronouns. Now, don't worry. The world will not come to an end if you fail to remember what these things are called. But hopefully, you can remember how they work. Now, these words come in subject and object pairs based on first, second, and third person, and on whether they refer to one or more people or things. In other words, whether they're singular or plural. So we have I and me, we and us, he and him, she and her, they and them. Happily, you is just you in all situations. A subject pronoun is one that goes before a verb. It's who or what is verbing. I beat Scott. In that sentence, I am the one who did the beating. And remember, we're talking about kickball and not physical violence. Well, Scott was the one beaten. But what if the game went the other way? Then I'd say Scott beat I, right? Of course not. Instead, I'd say Scott beat me. Me, in this case, is an object pronoun. An object pronoun is used to refer to whatever the verb is acting on. Basically, object pronouns come after verbs or prepositions. Now, if you're a native speaker of English, then you'd never say, "me beat Scott," or "Scott beat I," right? That's because you learned long ago not to make mistakes with subject and object pronouns. They just sound wrong. Similarly, you wouldn't say, "us beat Scott and Rob," or "Scott and Rob beat we." It's the same thing. Of course, if you didn't grow up speaking English, then you had to learn that pattern, but it's not the hardest thing to learn. But what about mean Tony? That's what trips us up. Oftentimes, people who would never say "me won the game" will still say Tony and me won the game. If you do that, then some persnickety person will look at you and say, "That's Tony and I." Well, that's great. So you learn that little lesson. You repeat to yourself over and over, "Tony and I, Tony and I." And then you say something like this: "The best players on the team were Tony and I." Or, "The kickball belongs to Tony and I." We hear that sort of thing often because we've had persnickety people tell us, "Tony and I, Tony and I." But here's the deal. These last examples are object pronouns, so it should be "the best players on the team were Tony and me," or "the kickball belongs to Tony and me." But wait a second, you've spent all this time hearing Tony and I, so how are you supposed to get it right? Well, here's how. If you're ever in doubt, split the words up and try them out separately. If you're trying to say Tony and me, I, whoever, won the game, then just split the words up. Tony won the game. Good. Me won the game. Not so good. I won the game. There we go. So it's Tony and I won the game. Try this one. The kickball belongs to Tony and... Is it I or me. We'll split them up again. The kickball belongs to I. No. The kickball belongs to Tony and me. There you go. So what's the bottom line? Well, subject pronouns typically go before verbs, in the subject part of the sentence or a clause. Object pronouns typically go after verbs or prepositions. Avoid using the wrong ones by splitting them up and trying them separately. Well, Mean Tony is coming over later and us will play some kickball with they. I think I need to review these materials. You can do that, or just get out of here.